We have a lot to go through in this segment relating to Donald Trump. Big legal news on a couple of fronts that we'll get into. And because of that, Trump came out and did in New York City a press conference and was so confused, and it was so rambly. And I have clips for you that we'll watch throughout this segment. Before bringing in Aaron, our legal expert, to break down what the legal news is that Trump is responding to, let me just start this off with clip one from the press conference.
This country, you can't have an election in the middle of a political season. We just had Super Tuesday, and we had a Tuesday after Tuesday already, and we had Louisiana the other day.
Really quickly, going to pause your viewing of this segment to ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's so helpful to grow the show. Just make sure that subscribe button is clicked and click the like button as well. Back to the video. So I have a lot more to play for you all, and it doesn't get any better for Trump. Of course, there he said you can't have an election in the middle of a political season. I think elections happen exclusively in political seasons. I'm going to bring in Aaron, our legal expert. Before we play more clips from this, explain to the viewers what it is that he was doing this press conference to respond to.
Yeah, well, folks, set your calendar dates because April 15th is going to be the day Donald Trump goes to trial in the criminal case in New York City. It'll be the first time a former or sitting president of the United States faces trial for criminal charges. Remember, this trial is related to the Stormy Daniels hush money payments case, where Donald Trump is facing 34 felony charges in New York City. If he's found guilty of all 34, really of any one of the 34, he faces up to 5 years in New York State prison. He's very upset, so he held this press conference, but there's really nothing he's going to be able to do to move this trial. So mark your calendars, April 15th is the day.
And I, of course, have follow-up questions, but just to throw in some of these clips, here's another one from this press conference.
This is all about election interference. This is all Biden-run things, meaning Biden and his thugs, because I don't know if he knows he's alive. And it's a shame. It's a shame what's happening to our country. This is election interference.
You know, we're going to get to Aaron in just a second, a clip of him trying to make a point about law and order. And it's pretty remarkable how quickly the party that coined themselves Law and Order has flipped around and now just does not believe at all in our justice system, thinks this is all being rigged against Trump, and the very idea of legal accountability for wrongdoing is offensive to them.
Yeah, for sure. And today we kind of saw that. So Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's lead criminal defense attorney in New York, he made a filing in the last week or two and even reiterated this point in the courtroom today, saying that there was massive evidence of prosecutorial misconduct, that he attacked the judge, again, Judge Merchant, and he did this without providing any evidence to support it. And the judge really called Blanche and Trump's legal team out in the courtroom today, saying that their claims are completely unfounded. They tried to delay the case up to 90 days or 3 months. They also tried to dismiss the charges completely based on this so-called misconduct, which they said stemmed from a late production of documents from the U.S. Attorney's Office. But none of that was true, and none of that was supported by any evidence. So Judge Merchant essentially said, you're going to trial in 3 weeks, whether you like it or not. And it's pretty big because there's no other criminal trial right now that is scheduled in a reasonable period of time. You have D.C., which is on hold, depending on what the Supreme Court does. You have Florida, where Judge Cannon's dealing with classified document issues that could take upwards several months, if not a year, to go to trial. And then you have Georgia, where although Fani Willis is trying to try this case over the summer, it's looking increasingly likely that won't start until after the election. So New York is the best chance for Trump to not only go to trial, but be convicted before November. And it's almost certain that at least him going to trial will happen in the next month.
I will say, with the Fani Willis case or with the federal election interference case, especially, honestly, all the cases, but especially those, it's so aggravating that Trump, his team, and Republicans generally are on board with delaying those as much as possible to push them past the election. Because if you actually, as I've said on the show with Aaron before, if you actually thought Trump did nothing wrong and he's going to be acquitted, and every time I bring up Trump's indictments, Trump supporters will say, oh, come on, those are going to fall apart. He's going to be acquitted once this goes to trial. Then you would want that to happen before the election. But you know Trump did the things, because some of them he did out in the open, And you know there's a pretty good chance he's going to be convicted of crimes related to an attempt to subvert the will of the people and install him as president for 4 more years despite the free and fair election. And drives me crazy that they're going to be successful likely in delaying that so far, because for the sake of Americans voting on if he should be president again, yes, we should know about his anti-democratic actions and how that's going to play out in a court of law before going in to vote. But before more of a discussion on this, here's another moment from this press conference.
And we'll bring crime back to law and order. We're going to get those words law and order back because our cities are a disaster.
That reminded me of this moment.
We're going to federalize. We're going to have very powerful crime, and you're going to be proud of it again.
Yeah. What a moment we're in, Aaron, where the candidate of the party that said they're for law and order is running on law and order. And this is absurd for 2 reasons, his rhetoric on this. The first being 91 felony counts, the law and order candidate. The second being, if you want someone who's going to have the correct impact, a good impact on crime, Biden's your guy, baby. Have you watched the crime rates since he got into office? They're plummeting. Violent crime is lower currently than it was any time under the Trump administration. Homicide rates have plummeted at a rate rarely seen in history. So you want law and order? Biden's your guy. Aaron, what else do we need to know about Trump's legal troubles?
Yeah, so I mean, today we also learned that remember when Donald Trump owed a bond of about $450 million as a result of the civil fraud trial? Well, he desperately begged the New York Appellate Court to stay enforcement of that judgment and allowing him to appeal the decision either only by putting up $100 million, and I say only because it's less than the 460, or by staying the judgment completely and not forcing Trump to put any bond up. Well, today the New York Appellate Court did give him some reprieve and ordered him to put up a bond of $175 million, which is more than what he asked for, within 10 days in order to appeal the civil fraud judgment. And they did so plain and simple because Trump is broke. Trump can't afford the $460 million judgment, no matter how much he claims he can. So now he'll have to put up this $175 million bond within 10 days. He's likely to do so with cash or securities or a combination of the two. But in other words, if the moment that money goes into the court register or registrar, if he loses on appeal, that money is going straight to the state of New York, and there's nothing he'll be able to do to get it back.
Right. And so I do want to emphasize for people, it's a temporary win, I guess, for him. But either way, whatever the timeline is, whatever amount he has to put up now, later, this hasn't changed that if his appeals aren't successful, the same amount's going to be paid. That's correct?
Yeah, that's correct. He's still going to end up having to pay the full $460 million or so. The one thing that is paused in this time once he puts up the bond is the interest stops accruing. So up until today, we've seen about $100,000 added onto the judgment with each passing day. That's going to pause while the case is on appeal, and then Trump will have to pay the $460 million or so afterwards, minus the $175 he put up on bond. But he'll still ultimately be on the hook for all of this.
All right. And before we wrap up on this, 2 more moments from this press conference.
Trump, we will stop him. Vicious. I said, boy, that's a bad one. Then I looked, she got elected. But then she tried to do it with the governor, and it didn't work. She went after the current governor, who's much more talented than she is. She went after the current governor. She was very nasty. And she polled at about 3%. She polled at nothing. And after 6 weeks or 7 weeks, she pulled out of the race. She ran for governor, on what she was doing to me. She thought that would work. It didn't work.
Did you ever accept money from a foreign government to pay the bond or their fines or?
No, I don't do that. I think you'd be allowed to, possibly. I don't know. I mean, if you go borrow from a big bank, many of the banks are outside of this. As you know, the biggest banks, frankly, are outside of our country. So you could do that, but I don't need to borrow money. I have a lot of money. I built a great company.
In a really strange mood, Aaron, do you have any closing thoughts on this?
My one closing thought is, imagine if President Barack Obama or President Joe Biden or Bill Clinton or even George Bush made these same comments. Just imagine the outrage from Donald Trump and his MAGA supporters. that same outrage should be here. He's a former president, shouldn't even be musing about the possibility of taking money from foreign governments to satisfy a civil judgment here in the United States. Raises a whole host of conflicts of interest, and his statements are practically inviting foreign governments or foreign nationals to throw money at him, kind of like they did to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. It's just unacceptable.
Absolutely. Aaron, where can people find you?
On all my social platforms, just at Aaron Parnas.